Right, so what really happened at planning and how this should have been handled. Y'all want to start by just saying this clearly, and I have written down notes because I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything. But everyone who showed up to the planning meeting was so right to be there, right? The residents who want sleep, safety, and clean neighborhoods are right. The business owners who are afraid of losing their livelihoods are right. But the problem isn't the people. The problem is the process. So what happened here wasn't community engagement. It was a decision that moved forward without education, without transparency, and without bringing the community together before the solution was chosen. Here are the facts on the record. A commercial compatibility overlay created at the end of 2025 was brought forward for Buchanan Street. Now, the Planning Commission confirmed that this was the first time this zoning tool has ever been applied anywhere in Davidson County. So basically, Councilman Brandon Taylor was a pioneer and willing to experiment with whatever long-term effects on the community without any community education or dialogue around it. Now, people showed up in force. Business owners, workers, residents, artists, students, faith leaders, and two truths existed at the same time. Residents expressed real concerns about noise, trash, and quality of life, and business owners expressed real fear around economic survival and displacement. Even planning commissioners admitted they didn't fully understand the ordinance, so it made sense that the community did not either. And I want to address something really quickly because it does keep coming up. Some people are fixated on semantics. Is it technically a curfew? Does it apply to current or future businesses? But that focus misses the point. People were not reacting to legal phrasing. They were reacting to impact. When a policy restricts operating hours for businesses that survive on late night revenue, it functions as a curfew, regardless of what the ordinance calls it. And you saw that at the meeting. Councilman Taylor would say that multiple times, like here.
Heard about the 11 o'clock curfew. There's not a curfew on the street. There's operating hours that are listed in the creation of the overlay. Existing businesses can continue to operate.
When a zoning tool caps growth, blocks expansion, and makes it easier for landlords to push tenants out, it threatens current businesses and future ones, regardless of the legal distinction. And when the community was never educated on a brand new zoning tool before it moved forward, confusion was not a failure of the people. It was a failure of leadership. So, I'm less interested in word games, and I'm much more concerned with what this does in real life. And I want to pause here because this matters. I fully agree with Sis who said businesses need to be better neighbors right here.
To the other Black business owners, we need to be better neighbors. The community is not all new homeowners. Our grandmothers and aunties still live there. We can do business and respect them as well. We need to clean up, make better parking measures for our patrons, and control our patrons.
She was right. Handle your customers, trash, and parking, and be strict about it. People deserve not to have trash in their yards. Elders deserve peace in their homes. Those concerns are legitimate. They should never be dismissed or minimized. But here's the problem. Those concerns were weaponized into a top-down solution instead of being brought into a community-led one. Now, this did not have to be done this way. What should have happened and what responsible leadership looks like is this: a community meeting, real notice, clear education on what the issue is, then a conversation that includes everyone: residents, business owners, workers, property owners, city departments responsible for enforcement. That is how you arrive at compromise. Maybe better trash management, better security, coordinated closing practices, parking solutions, or targeted enforcement. Instead, this community was handed a brand new zoning tool that was just created and that many didn't understand. I think it's important to note just how many of the Planning Commission admitted to not fully understanding it.
This ordinance concerns me. If I must be frank, I don't understand it.
I just don't know what I should be giving a recommendation on the hours of trap wings, or really any business. I don't want to approve or vote yes with conditions because I don't know enough about it. I don't know enough about their neighborhood.
Councilman Taylor asked planning to approve first and promise engagement later at council.
One of the things I'm asking this body to do tonight is to approve this, and we'll have community engagement at the council level.
That's ass backwards and ridiculous. I mean, especially when his governing style has long relied on newsletters rather than consistent, accessible, in-person engagement. When major policy is quietly embedded in newsletters, always released on the same day as important meeting dates, that's not meaningful notice. That does not allow working people to engage. So when he says people have been begging him for years, but the people most impacted say they didn't know, didn't get calls back, and didn't have meetings, that creates a credibility gap. Engagement that only happens with people you prefer or people who are more socially acceptable to you, like maybe the ones at the Centennial Sportsplex Town Hall. I don't know, but it's not engagement. That is selection. So I want to slow this down for just a moment, because this is where credibility really breaks. People keep talking about how everyone is spreading misinformation around the overlay. But the real question is, how did that misinformation happen? And who created the conditions for it? Here's the timeline, and timelines don't lie. Councilmember Taylor has relied heavily on newsletters as his primary form of communication, and I went back and reviewed his 2025 newsletters carefully. There were only 9 of them. The Commercial Compatibility Overlay, this brand new zoning tool, was not mentioned at all for most of the year, even though discussions were happening internally. There was no mention of it in his July newsletter. He didn't publish an August newsletter. He didn't publish a September newsletter, even though they were talking about it, even though there was meetings around it. Nothing around that, no town hall, nothing. And then suddenly in October, the CCO, the Commercial Compatibility Overlay, appears for the first time, even though we clearly see that him, Councilwoman Toombs, you can see here, and Councilwoman Gamble were working on it throughout those months that he just wouldn't publish a newsletter. And that would have been the best time to get a town hall going. Would have been the best time to get some education around it. But no, nothing at all. The October newsletter was published the same day that the Planning Commission meeting was happening, where this item was already moving forward. It was on the final read. It was at the end. And there was no explanation of what the overlay actually was. No plain language breakdown. No notice saying, hey, this is new. This is experimental. This could permanently affect your businesses and your neighborhood. It was framed as something already deep in the process, not something the community was being invited to shape, right? Then comes November, a critical month. This is when the overlay was being adjusted and prepared for filing in early December by Councilmember Brandon Taylor alone, without Toombs and Gamble on this one. And you guessed it, there was no November newsletter at all. No update, no warning, no education, no town hall. And even though he posted a November newsletter the past year, right? He posted one, and he actually posted it and he talked about his birthday, right? He failed to do so this year when he was intending to introduce something so new and experimental. Then in December, the legislation is filed and passes first reading, still with no public-facing effort to explain it to the people most affected. So when people say, why didn't folks understand this? The answer is simple. They were never given a real opportunity to do so. You cannot withhold information about a brand new zoning tool, skip months of communication, avoid public forums, and then blame the community for reacting strongly once they finally learn about it. Often at the very last minute. We know in this case, for sure at the very last minute, the day before. That is not misinformation by the people. That is a failure. And I would argue an intentional failure of communication by leadership. And this doesn't just apply to one council member. Other council members who are aware of this tool, who understood its implications, and who are now publicly defending it, also said nothing while it was quietly moving through the process. No education, no public forum, no early warnings. So when people describe this as a curfew, as an attack, as displacement, they are describing how it feels and how it functions when something is introduced in secrecy and haste. If elected officials want precision from the public, they must first offer transparency. And that did not happen here. We also heard something important on the public record. There was a prior attempt to address parking concerns that failed because the council member did not get the required support.
I was present at the October 20th Traffic and Parking Commission meeting in this room when Councilmember Taylor had a residential parking permit for this exact area that was discussed. During that hearing, Councilman Taylor argued that the neighborhood needed relief specifically from nightclubs and bars that were turning their parking lots and side streets into party space and causing huge bottlenecks on 10th and 11th Aves. The Parking Commission did not grant that request. Instead, they deferred the item indefinitely because it lacked their legally required 75% of residents signed petitions and left many questions about the trade-off residents would face. Now we see this commercial compatibility overlay. It is not a coincidence that this overlay targets the exact same alleged businesses and behaviors described in that deferred parking meeting. By establishing operational standards for bars and nightclubs and automobile parking, this overlay appears to be a strategic end-around intended to achieve through zoning what the neighbors abandoned achieving through parking regulations. Using permanent zoning power to solve a traffic enforcement issue is dangerous precedent. It forces existing legal businesses into non-conforming status and stifles the economic and social viability of the Buchanan Street corridor. If this issue is noise and parking after 10 p.m., the solution is parking enforcement and parking reform, not a restrictive overlay that bypasses the residents' buy-in required by the Metro Code for parking permits.
You do not experiment with permanent tools on historically Black communities because enforcement is inconvenient. And now I want to talk to y'all about why grandfathered in, this term, is not protection. So I want to talk about the phrase that is being used to calm people down. They're saying, oh, existing businesses are grandfathered in, nothing's going to happen to the current businesses. And that sounds reassuring, but it's not the protection that people think it is. Here's why. When a business is grandfathered in, it becomes what the law calls legally non-conforming. That means the business is allowed to exist, but only as long as nothing changes, right? And in the real world, we know that things always change. If a business closes temporarily, loses its lease, suffers damage or a fire, needs to renovate or expand, or is forced out by a landlord, that grandfather protection can disappear. And once it's gone, the business cannot reopen in the same form, and no similar business can replace it. That's how displacement happens without anyone ever saying the word shutdown, right? Now, here's the part people really need to understand. Most of these businesses do not own their buildings. They lease from property owners who already hold most of the power. So if a landlord decides to raise their rent, impose new restrictions, refuse to renew a lease, or make operating conditions unbearable, the business is gone. And with the overlay in place, it cannot return. We heard this exact scenario at the planning meeting. Someone described being harassed out of their space, and if the overlay is put in place, they would not be allowed to come back.
I'm an example of what will happen if this is passed. My sister and I owned and operated Van Leer Studios on Buchanan Street, an event space, photography, and videography studio. Unfortunately, we are currently closed due to microaggression, which limited our business structure and forced our hand extremely similar to this line item.
That's not preservation. That's attrition. Grandfathering doesn't protect growth. It doesn't protect ownership transfer. It doesn't protect against landlord pressure. And it certainly doesn't protect future Black entrepreneurs who might want to open a similar business. So when people say, don't worry, existing businesses are grandfathered in, what they're really saying is, you can stay as long as you don't need to grow, change, recover, or survive disruption. That's not security. That's a countdown. And I want to highlight what Fred Whitley said at the meeting. He discussed economic redlining, and he paralleled it. Economic redlining doesn't always look like a map with red lines anymore. Sometimes it looks like a neutral policy that just happens to land on the same communities over and over again. When you introduce a brand new zoning tool, one that has never been tested or fully understood, and the very first place you apply it is a historically Black business district, that's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. Especially when the effect is to cap growth, limit hours, restrict expansion, and make it harder for Black-owned businesses to survive long-term, while similar districts elsewhere in this city continue operating without these constraints. Redlining today isn't about denying loans. It's about restricting opportunity. It's about deciding which neighborhoods get to be vibrant, profitable, and culturally alive, and which ones get regulated into silence. And that's exactly what this does. So the Planning Commission deferred this, not because everything is fine, but because too much was unclear, too much was rushed, and too much harm was possible. They deferred only after the council member agreed also to defer it at the council level. This is a pause. This is not a resolution. What should happen next? So here's the path forward that actually respects everyone with action steps. So number one, we need a real community meeting with advance notice and facilitation, not a newsletter drop. Show up with that same intensity that you showed up to the planning meeting, right? We need education first. What does this tool do, right? What does this commercial compatibility overlay do? How is it permanent, right? What it does not do, and what alternatives exist. At the meeting also can be discussed collaborative solutions. Businesses and residents working together on cleanup, right? Security, noise mitigation, and enforcement. And then finally, we need accountability at council, right? There can be no votes until this process happens transparently. I need you all to email your council member immediately. Planning made it clear that the council has the final say, and you need your voice to be heard loud and clear. It is concerning that the other council members that are posting about this keep listing all of these provisions that are supposed to be good, but we know are able to be later weaponized by the landowners. It is extremely concerning that these people were elected and entrusted to represent us, and they're so ready and willing to experiment with this historically Black district with so little feedback and proof. Where are the people who asked for this? How many people want it? Where are the signatures? Where was the dialogue? Where was the education? Y'all are always posting different educational things or talking about whatever, right? And so I don't understand how council members, especially of the minority caucus, could push this so vigorously with so little due diligence to the actual community that's going to be affected. This is majorly concerning. This is egregious. And I just don't get it. I don't understand how anyone could think this is okay. And so I need you to let your council know just that. Let them know you would like for them to do better in their representation and not agree to experiments within this historically Black community. This community deserves collaboration, not experimentation. History has taught us all too well what happens with experiments in our communities, right? In closing, protecting residents and protecting Black businesses are not mutually exclusive. But silencing a community while deciding for it is never the answer. I want to shout out to those who are getting more involved in local politics. It's never too late. I mean, you're a citizen. You have a right to know what your elected officials are doing, and more importantly, what they're not doing, right? You pay them. Let's keep showing up in a big way with these local politics and keep a fire lit under these politicians. A lot of them have been used to sliding by with little to no oversight due to busy, overworked, and uninvolved constituents. We're going to make a point to watch our next council meeting, right? Watch that next planning meeting. And if you can't be there in person, which a lot of people can't, watch it on the Metro Nashville Network on YouTube. We're in 2026. And we are not going to be sleeping in any type of politics, especially the local ones. So y'all tap in.